All right, good evening, and we are back for another Bible storytelling session. And right here, I have the Lord's Word right here in front of us, just to ensure that we are not diverting from that, and just to tell some stories from these scriptures that are just overwhelming and fantastic. So we are transitioning now. This will be the first week where we can choose our own stories to tell. And I've actually transitioned into the book of Mark, our second gospel, and more specifically, Mark chapter 5. And in Mark chapter 5, we have at this point seen Jesus do some pretty miraculous things, and honestly, some things that have thrown some people for the loop. He has already done healings, he has already called out demons, and he has also called out the Pharisees for their teachings that were against him. And so, in that, we are going to go to Mark chapter 5, and at this point, Jesus has returned to Galilee. He is preaching to the crowds, and there were crowds following him everywhere because they had heard what he was doing. And as he was going through this crowds, just something miraculous had happened. And a great crowd had followed him, and there was a woman in this crowd. And this woman had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And she had suffered under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports of Jesus and what he was doing and came up behind him in the crowd. And she said to herself that if I even touch his garment, I will be made well, I will be healed. And immediately, as she touched his garment, the clothes on his body, she was healed. And Jesus in himself, and knew that his power had left him, as his power had left him, he turned around in the crowd and asked to this crowd of many, many people, he asked, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples looked at him and said, he looked around to see who had done it. And his disciples said, "You see the crowd that's around you. How are you going to ask who touched me?" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." And that's the story. So we have this story of this woman, and is frequently referred to as the story of the bleeding woman. And this bleeding woman had suffered some kind of bleeding. Not sure what specifically that would be at the time. Typically, it would be of feminine nature. But in that, she was unable to be healed. And as she was unable to be healed, she was also placed on the outside of society, right? She was known to be unclean. She was not a reputable person in this time and in this space. And she says that if she just comes in this crowd, and I just am amazed by the fact that there's this crowd of people, and she comes and she says that her faith, she knew by touching the clothes that he was wearing that she would be healed. And I want to ask if there are any thoughts or anything that just kind of sticks out in this story. I love this story, so I ramble, but if there were any thoughts or just any kind of key takeaways or questions, or in relation to any of our other stories that you could draw to.
I find a key takeaway with this, that the mercy of Christ, the healing power is food for the starving, the most down and out, the most, as much as the richest, the most blessed with material things. And it is a beautiful thing that all people, no matter their disposition, could have the mercy of Christ.
What do you think that calls us to do in relation to this story as believers?
I believe that in relation, she humbled herself before Christ. She kneeled down before the Messiah. And like you said, society viewed her as unclean. I have seen this portrayed in the show The Chosen. It's quite a moving story. I do believe it's just showing how merciful Christ can be toward anyone in any kindred denomination.
Yeah. And I think he calls us to the same. He calls us to be compassionate and just loving of those who aren't expected in the same way, that aren't in the norm in society, within the margins, like who are those that are on the outskirts. He still had compassion for them. And what set her apart was her faith. It was only her faith that, she had, that is what healed her, was her faith. And that's all it takes today as well, is the faith that we have to move mountains. I mean, we see that in Matthew as well. It's like the faith of a mustard seed is able to move mountains. And I just think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think this is a good, very, very good presentation of that. Any other final thoughts before we depart from the story of the bleeding woman? Do you like this story?
It's a good story.
It's a good story. Do you think it will benefit you in the future?
All the scripture will benefit me in the future.
Fair enough. All right. Well, it was a good evening, and we will be back for another story.